Hello again, it's Pastor Dave Schreffler. I'm the pastor at Zion Lutheran Church in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. I do these Gander at the Gospels to take a look at the Gospel to see how God might be speaking to us and through the Gospel that's appointed for the Sunday that's coming up. This coming Sunday is July 25th, 2021, which means we have a reading from the Gospel of St. John, the 6th chapter. Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they all sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. This is the gospel of the Lord. You know, I think about the disciples often through many of the ministries that they would have been involved with Jesus, because I just wonder sometimes, how could they not have been afraid when they have witnessed the things that they have seen? I wonder how the disciples feel in these 2 particular things that happen in this gospel text. Such a great crowd that is in need of food, and then Jesus walking on the water. Today when we see the miraculous happen, we're always looking for ways that we can explain it. Like you see a magician walk on water, and you think, well, there must be clear plexiglass under the water there. Or we see people fed in a great miracle, and we wonder, or we think, even in the case of the feeding of the 5,000, well, everybody must have brought a little bit of a lunch along so that they could feed everyone, right? But I have some thoughts about this text that I want to share with you, and we're going to kind of go through it comment by comment. So we're going to start with Jesus' opening comment. He says, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" Notice Jesus poses the question, and he doesn't say, "Where are they going to buy bread?" He's not putting the expectation on the people to find food. Instead, he places it clearly in the lap of his disciples. And that leads to some thoughts for me. My first thought is, Jesus doesn't put the blame on the individual people who are following him to be stuck in this situation where they're in the middle of nowhere without food to eat. He doesn't say, well, they should just pull themselves by their bootstraps and figure this out. Or he doesn't say, well, they shouldn't have left home without having proper uh, supplies, or Jesus doesn't say they need to make better decisions in their lives, right? Jesus instead says, where will we, meaning he and his disciples, find the food for these people? He sees a problem, my friends, but Jesus sees an opportunity for his disciples to learn about helping others, even if it's just helping strangers. Here's my second thought. The text does not tell us that the people were complaining about their plight at that point in time. They weren't, they hadn't, we don't know of any murmuring around the crowd that they have no food, right? Jesus sort of looks into the future and he sees their situation, but he sees an opportunity. Jesus is thinking ahead, even before they realize their own needs. And that's something that I find in my life often to be true, that Jesus is always thinking a little bit ahead of me, anticipating my needs, and then supplying those things when I really didn't even understand how I might have needed what Jesus supplies for me. You know, too many people, especially in a society like we have today, where, oh my gosh, the cost of items. Have you noticed how expensive things are now? Not only food, but other items as well. We have this inflation that's going on. So people, it's so easy to get so caught up in our own needs and our own wants and our own problems that it's hard for us to have true introspection. We just think about our needs and don't think about our blessings. We don't think about how we are already blessed in so many ways. You know, Shakespeare, I try to think of the quote from Shakespeare often, "To thine own self be true," right? We have to really do some introspection and understand where we are and what needs we have, because Jesus anticipates those needs. So we know that Jesus saw an opportunity. We know that Jesus anticipated that need. And finally, Jesus acted before the people could ask for the help. And this is how Jesus works in our lives. Jesus acts first. When we think of the cross event, we don't have to go to Jesus and plead for or work for our salvation. Jesus acts first for us. Jesus doesn't wait for us to ask for his love and mercy and grace. Jesus offers that to us unconditionally. So we move on. Jesus says, where will we buy bread for these people to have something to eat? And then he waits for the responses of the disciples. The first response that the disciples give is, we can't do it, right? Yeah, the text doesn't say that. You know, the text says it would take 6 months' wages to be able to buy enough food. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't carry 6 months' wages in my pocket or in my wallet. And there weren't debit cards and credit cards at the time of Jesus. There weren't local Walmarts or grocery stores, right? The disciples may have had a coin or two clinking in their robes, but these were not rich people. So the disciples' first response is something that's not surprising to us. You know, we can't do it. We don't have enough. The second response that they give is, well, okay, we do have a few resources, but this isn't enough to make a difference, right? It's Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, who finds this boy. I don't know about the boy. I don't know where it came from. We're not told. He just, he says that this boy has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what is this among so many? Now, tell me, people of the church, does that sound familiar to you? How often have we heard people size up a situation in the church and say, we have too little, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough volunteers? It's our human inclination to begin to think in life from out of our sparsity or our scarcity than it is to think out of what abundance we have, how much we do have, time and talent and treasure. So the disciples first say, we can't. Then they say, we don't have enough. And finally, someone steps forward. We have to assume someone steps forward in faith, the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. This may be all that he has. I think of the widow's mite. I think of the woman who gave 2 coins, and Jesus says she has given out of all she has. This may be all that the boy has, but he offers it up for Jesus to use. And so, taking all this in, Jesus tells his disciples something really interesting. He says, make the people sit down. It sort of reminds me of the raising of Lazarus, where Lazarus comes out of the tomb, and it's Jesus who says to the community, unbind him and let him go. Jesus turns to the disciples and he says, make the people sit down. Now you have to understand, there was a huge crowd. This was a large area, 5,000 more people. Have you ever tried to get 100 people in a church to sit down without screaming, "The Lord be with you," right? I mean, and now imagine 5,000 people without a microphone system, without a Blair horn or one of those, horns that you can get people's attention. But Jesus says, make the people sit down. And, I have to ask this question. Have you ever felt like Jesus made you sit down and stop? We are very busy in this world. I think Jesus has to work very hard. God has to work very hard to get our attention, to recognize how miracles are happening in our lives all the time, or how even just the presence of God is with us each and every day. We get too distracted, as I said earlier. We get too busy to see things for the way they are, to give God the praise that we should. And that keeps us from stepping forward like we should. It keeps us from offering what we have like we should. Keeps us from being able to discern that, what the needs of others are. We get stuck in our own heads. We get stuck in our own problems. We forget to think about we're to be serving others. But back to that question, has God ever made you sit down? Has God ever told you enough is enough and you need to stop for a while? Whether it's in the middle of a storm that you're experiencing, time where you need to really put in some reflection and discernment. God sometimes will make us slow down. I've experienced that often in my life, where finally God has to do something pretty dramatic to say, Dave, you need to sit down. You need to take some time. You need to stop. So God is saying something to us today through these 2 miracles. The feeding of the 5,000. I didn't even talk about Jesus walking on the water. But we see how Jesus comes to us in our lives in 2 ways. He comes to us through others. He tells the disciples, make the people sit down. And the disciples are part of the feeding process. And then Jesus comes to us personally. The disciples, in the middle of this storm on the sea, Jesus comes walking to them on the water. Jesus comes through others. Jesus comes to us personally. It is a ministry of presence for Jesus, either through the presence of others who bear the light of Christ to us, or he comes to us personally and walks beside us through the presence of the Holy Spirit in our lives. So I think these texts need to remind us that, something I say often, I say after every Gander at the Gospel, I will say, go out and be someone's thankful today. And what I mean by that is, find a way today to do something for someone where they will say, I am thankful to have that person in my life. We have to recognize the Holy Spirit when it's working in our lives. We have to recognize and be open to seeing the opportunities for doing God's work, being the hands and feet of Christ. And listen to this, we also have to be open to allow others to bless us. Oftentimes, we get stuck in this thought that we have to always do it ourselves. We have to do it alone. Besides the fact of thinking that we don't have enough, we don't have what it might take, we don't have the time, we don't have. It doesn't take much for Jesus to turn just a small amount of something into great abundance. We simply have to get out of God's way and offer our gifts. But we also have to get out of our own way and allow others to offer their gifts to us. Fear, being afraid in this life, fear will freeze us into inactivity. Fear will make us hesitate. Think of the one story where Jesus is walking on the water in the gospel. In one of the gospels, Peter says, well, let me come to you, Jesus. And Jesus says, come. And Peter starts walking on the water. But then in his fear, it freezes him and he begins to sink, right? Fear can sink us. Faith moves us forward. And where that moves us forward, I can't say. Today is today. We can handle what we can handle today. The accomplishments we might be able to do today might be very small. The accomplishments that we can do today, we may see great abundance. We just have to be willing to offer what we have and then to get out of God's way and let God work in our lives and work as we help and seek to serve others as well. So there's my gander at the gospel for this week. I hope this was a blessing for you. You have blessed me in watching. Remember, your faith is not what theologian you follow. It's not what translation of the Bible you read. It's not even what church you belong to. Your faith is that living, active, breathing time where we work towards serving others, where we recognize the abundance that we have, where we open ourselves up to the Holy Spirit to lead us and guide us in serving others and offering up the praise and prayer and thanksgiving that we should to God every day. And as I always say, be someone's thankful today. God bless you.